Welcome back, friends, and in today's video we're going to talk about the 8 actions that you can take to foster collective efficacy on your teams. Let's get started. So what is collective efficacy? Let's take a look at one of my favorite books from Jenny Donahue, Collective Efficacy and How Educators' Beliefs Impact Student Learning. And she defines collective efficacy as collective self-perception that teachers in a given school make an educational difference to their students over and above the educational impact of their homes and communities. So where's this idea of collective efficacy come from anyway? Well, let's go way back from an early research from Rosenthal and Jacobson titled Teachers' Expectancies, Determinants of Pupils' IQ Gains, to a concept called Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect is this idea that if teachers are led to expect that students are going to perform well, then those students indeed do perform well. And a similar idea is the Golem effect, and this is the opposite. So if teachers are led to believe that students will not perform well, then those students indeed do not perform. What is all this voodoo? If a group of teachers believe that they can make a difference, they will indeed engage in the actions that are going to make the difference. In a 2011 study from Rachel Ells titled A Meta-Analysis of the Relationship Between Collective Teacher Efficacy and Student Achievement, Ells found a clear relationship between the beliefs or perceptions that teachers had and student achievement. And this takes us to John Hattie. A lot of you might be familiar with his work. He is a researcher in Australia, and he has done a synthesis of meta-analyses over the years and continues to add more and more meta-analyses to these, including Ells' work on collective efficacy and others, and has found that collective efficacy has an effect size of 1.57 on student achievement. So in statistics, effect size represents the strength in the relationship between two variables. In this case, effect size of 0.4 represents 1 year's growth for 1 year's effort. So an effect size above 0.4 is going to represent a greater growth than 1 year for that same year of effort. Now let's think about this. Collective teacher efficacy, according to the synthesis of meta-analyses that John Hattie has done, is currently at about 1.57. So that's nearly 4 years of growth for that 1 year of effort. Now how can this be? Well, if you have a group of teachers that have the perception that they can make a difference, they have the knowledge, the skills, the resources in order to come together, work effectively, work collaboratively in order to increase student achievement, they're more likely then to implement those very actions that are going to make the biggest difference. As opposed to teams that don't believe they can make a difference are likely to not engage and implement the actions that would make a difference. It's as simple as that. So collective teacher efficacy, when you believe that you can do it, when you believe that students can do it, you're more likely to put forth those efforts. So now let's talk about the 8 actions that you can take as a leader to foster collective teacher efficacy on your teams. So I was very fascinated with this idea of collective teacher efficacy, so I did a little research of my own. So I looked at several books, including Leading for Powerful Learning, Tell Me So I Can Hear You, Leading Collaborative Learning, and as you can see, many, many more. So after going through these texts, these articles, and these other resources, and my own experience in the work that I've done as a coach and a consultant in education, is I found some common themes. And the common themes that I found were around culture, conditions, and competencies. And in these 3 domains, I have 8 actions for you today that you can take that will support and foster collective efficacy on your teams. So let's take a look. Number 1, in the domain of culture, we have purpose. This is an opportunity to, as a leader, to identify what are the beliefs and the values of your team. So engage in an activity and give your team members a voice so that they find a compelling reason to collaborate and engage in this work of increasing student achievement. What are their beliefs? What are their values? And from that, we want to develop a shared purpose, so we're all moving in the same direction. Are there any competing commitments that currently exist that might be getting in the way of the work that we're doing? For example, there may be an expectation that a team meets weekly and engages in effective collaboration, while at the same time their meetings get hijacked by an administrator or a leader such as yourself because there might be deadlines associated with district assessments or other things that could get in the way. So as a leader, keep your eyes and ears open for anything that might be pulling the team away from focusing on the shared purpose. Under culture, our second action that you can take is around mindset. So as a team leader, consider how you might cultivate a collaborative culture of continuous quality improvement. So does the team believe that they are on this journey of continuous improvement? Every year we get a different group of students. It's very complex working with humans. So how can we cultivate this mindset of continuous quality improvement and a culture of collaboration? And secondly, in association with this idea of mindset, is this commitment to learning together. We're not just meeting to engage in business. We're meeting as an effort of learning. I call this a collaborative learning team. I'll make a video on this later. But collaborative learning team is this idea that we come together, we learn together, and we implement best practices to support our students. Let's move into conditions. And our third action that you can take as a leader to cultivate and foster collective efficacy on your teams, and that is structure. Teams need a designated space that encourages collaboration. So how are the tables arranged? How do they sit in the room? Where are the resources? Are there team agreement posters on the wall? Do they have access to chart paper or whiteboards to capture their thinking? Are there post-it notes out? We want to make sure that there's structures in place that reduce friction, reduce the resistance to come together and collaborate. Let's make that easy and let's make that process productive for the teams. And also, is there a designated time? There should be a non-negotiable time every week where teams are expected to come together, work together, collaborate, and learn together in order to close the achievement gaps that we see in education. This is complex work and it takes a commitment with all the resources there and the time needed to do it. So as a leader, you can ensure that that happens. All right, the fourth action you can take as a leader is create norms. In fact, norms, there's a lot of baggage that comes with the concept of norms, so I like to think of it as team agreements. So bring the team together and engage in a protocol where you can support the team in identifying team agreements that's going to ensure that the team is psychologically safe and feels comfortable and confident and able to voice their opinion and make a contribution to the team. So see my other video on the 8 actions that you can take to cultivate psychological safety on your teams. I go into a lot more detail on psychological safety there. But clearly, psychological safety and voice equity are going to be very, very important aspects of the norms that are needed in order for teams to come together and have those rich collegial conversations that actually make a difference. So the 5th action that you can take is about process. So if we've got team agreements or norms as a critical element that's going to support effective collaboration, which is going to lead to collective efficacy, we need to engage in a process that supports that. And there's no simpler way to do that than with protocols. So a good leader and effective team engage in protocols that support collaboration and support voice equity. We want to make sure that every team member's voice is heard, that every team member makes a contribution, and that every team member is involved in decision making. The best way to do that is with protocols. So that is going to be the process as a leader you're going to use to help foster this collective efficacy, which again, remember, is this perception that they have the knowledge, skills, and resources to make a difference. So if you have a process and you're supporting rich dialogue and collegial conversations, then the perception is that they have what they need in order to do the work. Also in this idea of process is ensuring that every team member has a role, and that in that role it's clearly defined and they know what to do and they can practice and they can make mistakes without the fear of failure in order to continue to grow in their role and make a valuable contribution. Again, I'll talk more about that in my other video around psychological safety, so be sure to take a look at that. All right, so we've talked about culture, we've talked about conditions. Let's move into the third domain that I have identified after looking at several resources, and that is competencies. So the sixth action you can take is helping your team see cause and effect. So I alluded to this earlier. Who has the greatest impact on student outcomes? Well, it's students, and the actions that they take has the greatest impact on outcomes. Which stakeholder has the greatest influence on student actions? That's going to be teacher actions. Well, which stakeholders have the greatest impact on teacher actions? And that's going to be the team actions. So this idea of a collaborative learning team coming together and influencing one another on how we're going to show up in our classrooms in order to influence the correct student behaviors in order to get the outcomes we're looking for. This is the idea of cause and effect. A good leader is going to help a team see that student actions inform teacher actions, and teacher actions influence student actions. This is a very important concept, and a lot of teachers miss it. So how do we do that? We need to have clear and measurable goals. We need to collect multiple sets of data in order to see that. So it might be district data, common assessment data. So the best data that I believe a team can look at in order to get a good understanding of students is student work samples from formative assessments. So one of the best things a leader can do is bring the team together and go through looking at student work samples. And there's a protocol for doing that, and I'll leave that in the notes. So again, cause and effect, helping teachers see the relationship between student actions and teacher actions and team actions, and looking at student work samples in order to get a good understanding of how their actions are influencing the students' thinking, and then use student thinking from the student work samples to inform our next teacher action. So the seventh action you can take as a leader to foster collective efficacy on your teams is to engage in purposeful practice. This is going to be this idea of teams learning together, preferably looking at student work protocols, reflecting and identifying trends and gaps in student learning, which then informs the teacher actions that we're going to implement, and those teacher actions are going to influence student behaviors, which are going to get the outcomes that we're looking for. And teams are going to hold one another accountable. Good leaders are going to help support and foster that, so we're holding each other accountable. Again, when all the team members believe in each other and believe in themselves, we call that collective teacher efficacy, and there's a greater chance that they're going to now implement with fidelity. Well, as a leader, we want to hold one another accountable for doing that. And the more that we implement as a team, the more that we trust in one another and in ourselves that we're actually going to get the work done. And when we get the work done, that's when it's going to make the difference. So the eighth action you can take to foster collective efficacy on your team is monitoring. Monitor team performance. First of all, make sure the team has a collective goal. And that's not just a goal for student achievement, which of course all teams want, also a goal for team collaboration. Ensure that the team is thinking about themselves and how they work, as well as their goal of increasing student performance, because there's a correlation there. When students are performing, teams are working well together and they're working effectively. And provide the team feedback. Let them know how well they're doing with their team agreements, how well teams are contributing, voice equity, the use of protocols, the level of implementation, bringing data back and learning together and implementing that. Let the team see themselves, reflect back what is happening on the team to the team on a regular basis, so they have some awareness about how they come together and how they perform. And then of course, celebrate. Celebrate the successes, celebrate the small wins, take the time to let the team know when they're doing well. This is going to reinforce their own individual self-efficacy as well, which is going to increase their collective efficacy. As a leader, if you have some clarity around a few actions that you can take that's going to hit each of the three domains around culture, conditions, and competency, then you are more effectively going to be able to provide direction to your team. You've made it to the end of this video, and you are rewarded with a collective efficacy leader assessment that I've created that covers these three domains in 8 areas, so that you can get a clear understanding of where you might have some gaps and the things that you can do to help better support your team. So leave a comment below on an action that you've taken to foster collective efficacy on your teams. Thanks for being here, my friends. I'll see you next time.